join us on Patreon, and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
Throughout the tapestry of American history, the narratives that have been meticulously woven often reflect a selective portrayal of the nation's past. Stories of conquest, expansion, and the forging of a new identity dominate the pages of history textbooks, leaving behind the intricate and invaluable accounts of those who do not fit neatly into these grand narratives. Among the most glaring omissions is the erasure of Black Native Americans, individuals of both African and Native American ancestry, whose rich heritage and profound contributions have been systematically overlooked or deliberately excluded from mainstream historical discourse. This erasure not only distorts the full story of America's formation, but also perpetuates myths about racial and cultural homogeneity within indigenous and African American communities. To understand how this erasure occurred, it is essential to first explore the complex intersections of African and Native American histories. Long before European settlers arrived on the continent, the diverse indigenous nations of North America thrived with their own intricate societies, governance systems, and cultural practices. With the advent of European colonization, these communities faced displacement, violence, and cultural erosion. Concurrently, the transatlantic slave trade introduced millions of Africans to the Americas under brutal conditions of forced labor and dehumanization. Over time, the paths of displaced African slaves and marginalized indigenous populations intertwined, leading to the emergence of communities that embodied both heritages. The alliances between Africans and Native Americans were born out of mutual resistance to European oppression. In many cases, Native tribes offered sanctuary to runaway slaves, integrating them into their societies through marriage, adoption, and shared cultural practices. Tribes such as the Seminole, Creek, Cherokee, and Choctaw are notable for their historical relationships with African-descended people. The Black Seminoles, for example, became a formidable force in resisting U.S. expansion and slavery, blending African and Seminole traditions into a resilient culture of resistance. Despite these significant alliances and the formation of distinct Black Native communities, their stories have been systematically marginalized in historical accounts. One contributing factor to this erasure lies in the socio-political constructs of race in America. The binary classification of individuals as either Black or Native American failed to account for the fluid identities and cultural exchanges that characterize Black Native experiences. The infamous one-drop rule in the United States legally categorized anyone with African ancestry as Black, effectively erasing other aspects of their heritage. This rigid racial categorization was compounded by the federal government's policies of Native American assimilation and displacement, which further disrupted the recognition and continuity of Black Native communities. Moreover, the historiography of America has often been dictated by those in positions of power, predominantly white scholars and policymakers, who constructed narratives that aligned with colonial and racial ideologies. Textbooks and educational curricula have historically presented Native Americans and African Americans as separate and distinct groups with little interaction. This deliberate separation serves to simplify the complex racial dynamics of American history, reducing the understanding of identity and erasing the lived experiences of Black natives. As a result, the contributions of Black Native individuals in resistance movements, cultural preservation, and societal development remain underrepresented or entirely absent in educational materials. The ramifications of this erasure are profound. Without the acknowledgement of Black Native histories, the narrative of resistance against colonization and slavery is incomplete. Figures such as John Horse, a Black Seminole leader who fought alongside the Seminoles against U.S. forces, exemplify the resilience and leadership within these communities. Yet, his name rarely appears in history textbooks. Similarly, the stories of Black Cherokees and other Afro-Indigenous peoples who navigated the treacherous landscape of forced removals and systemic racism remain untold. This exclusion not only dishonors their legacy, but also deprives future generations of understanding the full scope of American resilience and multiculturalism. The erasure also impacts the contemporary identities of Black Native descendants, who continue to grapple with recognition and belonging. Many face systemic barriers in claiming their indigenous heritage due to rigid tribal enrollment policies and pervasive stereotypes that question their authenticity. This struggle for recognition is compounded by the lack of representation in media, academia, and public discourse, further marginalizing these communities. The denial of their dual heritage perpetuates a cycle of invisibility that hinders efforts towards social justice and cultural preservation. Efforts to reclaim and amplify Black Native histories are emerging through grassroots activism, scholarship, and artistic expression. Scholars and activists are working to unearth archival materials, oral histories, and cultural artifacts that shed light on these obscured narratives. Digital platforms and social media have become vital tools for sharing stories and connecting diaspora communities, fostering a renewed sense of identity and solidarity. Documentaries, literature, and educational initiatives are gradually challenging the dominant historical paradigms, demanding a more inclusive recounting of America's past. However, significant work remains to dismantle the institutional barriers that perpetuate this erasure. Educational reform is crucial in integrating comprehensive and accurate representations of Black Native histories into school curricula. This includes revising textbooks, supporting culturally responsive teaching, and acknowledging the interconnected struggles of African and Native American peoples. Furthermore, policy changes that address tribal enrollment and recognition criteria can help validate the identities of Black Native descendants, fostering greater inclusivity within indigenous nations. Ultimately, confronting the erasure of Black natives from American history is not merely an act of historical correction. It is a step toward healing and justice. Recognizing the intertwined legacies of African and Native American peoples enriches the understanding of America's past and honors the resilience, resistance, and contributions of those who navigated the complexities of dual oppression. It challenges the nation to embrace a more truthful and inclusive narrative, one that acknowledges all who have shaped its course. In embracing this truth, society can begin to dismantle the myths that have long obscured the multifaceted realities of race, identity, and resistance in America. It is a call to honor the voices that have been silenced and to celebrate the vibrant cultures that continue to thrive despite centuries of marginalization. Only through such acknowledgement can the nation move toward a future that genuinely reflects the diversity and strength of its people.